My parents threw me out of the house because they believed I had somehow betrayed them to fund my college tuition. They told me they didn't want me living under their roof anymore. The root of it all? My older brother, Ryan. Ryan is 5 years older than me and was always the family favorite. It was obvious to everyone. From a young age, I realized that no matter what I did, Ryan always outshone me. Whether it was grades, sports, or just getting attention, he had it all. So, I eventually stopped trying to compete. He went to law school, and my parents couldn't stop talking about how proud they were. But when I got accepted into a prestigious university in Canada to study art history, things took a very different turn. My parents had told me from the start that they couldn't afford my tuition, so I'd need to figure out a way to fund it myself. I even asked them to co-sign a student loan with me, but they flat out refused, saying they didn't want to take on that kind of financial risk. It was a bitter pill to swallow. They had paid for Ryan's law school, but when it came to me, they claimed they needed to prioritize their plans to launch a business. They insisted that they couldn't handle any additional financial burdens at the time. I felt like they were setting me up for failure, making it impossible for me to pursue the opportunity one had worked so hard for. Knowing that there was no way they would contribute to my living expenses or travel costs either, I started looking for alternatives. I figured that once I got to Canada, I could work part-time to make ends meet, but I needed some help covering the initial tuition. With no other options, I turned to my aunt, Laura. Laura is my mom's older sister, and she's genuinely the kindest person I know. Growing up, she was always supportive of me, even though I knew my mom resented her for reasons I couldn't fully understand at the time. My mom always kept her distance from Laura, and I was encouraged to do the same. I only got to see her at family gatherings, where I had to be discreet about talking to her, especially when my mom was nearby. The truth is, my mom's resentment towards Laura seemed rooted in jealousy. Laura is 7 years older than my mom and is a highly successful pediatric surgeon. My mom, while successful in her own right as an accountant, always seemed to compare herself to Laura and come up short in her own mind. Laura, for her part, never rubbed her success in anyone's face, but my mom interpreted every word or action as a slight. It was sad, really. When I went to Laura for help, she didn't hesitate for a second. She offered to cover my tuition and even let me stay with her until I was ready to leave for school. I begged her to keep it a secret because I knew how furious my parents would be if they found out I had gone to her. Unfortunately, Ryan somehow discovered my arrangement with Laura. One day, when I got home after hanging out with some friends, I found all my belongings packed into boxes in the living room. My parents were waiting for me, with Ryan standing smugly beside them. My dad had a stack of papers in his hands, and I immediately knew this wasn't going to end well. My dad accused me of betraying the family, saying Ryan had shown them proof that I had sold sensitive business plans to Laura in exchange for tuition money. At first, I was confused, but when my dad threw the papers at me, I realized what was happening. Ryan had forged a series of fake emails between me and Laura, making it look like I had stolen business ideas and shared them with her. The emails were shockingly convincing, complete with timestamps and details that made them seem legitimate. I denied everything and begged my parents to let me prove the emails were fake. I offered to show them my laptop, but they refused. They said they trusted Ryan completely and didn't need any further proof. They demanded I leave the house immediately. Despite my attempts to explain, they wouldn't listen. I was devastated but had no choice but to leave. Laura welcomed me into her home, treating me with more kindness than my parents ever had. She became my only real family after that. My parents never contacted me again, and the only message I received from Ryan was a smug text telling me how happy he was to see me gone. He also hinted that he had found out about my arrangement with Laura by snooping on my laptop, which I often left open in my room. In the years that followed, Laura supported me through college and beyond. I graduated, found a good job, and eventually moved out. Meanwhile, my parents' business thrived for a while, but they cut off ties with the rest of the family, believing they had outgrown everyone. They seemed to think they were above everyone else now that they were financially successful. Then, during the pandemic, everything changed. Their business, which revolved around eco-friendly baked goods, took a huge hit, and they were forced to sell their home and other assets to stay afloat. A few weeks ago, out of nowhere, my mom called me at work. She asked if I had time to talk, but I told her I'd call back after work. I needed time to decide if I even wanted to hear what she had to say. When I called them later, my mom tried to apologize, saying they had made a huge mistake by kicking me out in favor of Ryan. She asked me to visit them, claiming they wanted to make amends. I was hesitant but agreed to meet them the next day. To my surprise, they were now living in a rundown apartment in a poor neighborhood. They told me about their struggles and how Ryan had taken over the business, only to start keeping most of the profits for himself. They were now financially dependent on him, but he barely gave them enough to survive. It didn't take long for them to ask me for help. They wanted financial support, but I told them there was no way I was helping them after everything they had done to me. I walked out, leaving them to deal with the mess they had created. Since then, they've been blowing up my phone with calls and messages, but I've stood firm in my decision. Update 1: Thank you for all your comments and support. After much thought, I've decided to stick to my decision not to help my parents. They don't deserve it. I talked to Laura about this, and she agrees. She even mentioned that if my dad was truly desperate, he could have reached out to her directly after I refused, but he hasn't. It seems their pride is still intact when it comes to her, but not when it comes to me. Either way, it's not our problem. It's been over a decade since they threw me out, and they've never once tried to sincerely apologize. The only reason they reached out now is because they're in financial trouble, and they see me as a potential solution. That makes me angry every time I think about it. I feel like I shouldn't have even given them the time of day, but at least I can say I heard them out. Even so, their so-called apology was half-hearted and self-serving. Their financial decisions were reckless, investing everything into a business during a pandemic and trusting Ryan completely, despite his track record of selfishness. They can deal with the consequences of their choices. I'm not going to let their texts and calls get to me. They made their bed, and now they have to lie in it. Update 2: 2 weeks ago, I visited my parents, and after that, I cut off contact with them. They kept trying to reach me, but I didn't respond. Eventually, they stopped, and I thought that was the end of it. My aunt thought they might reach out to her instead, but they didn't. We both felt relieved. That changed last night when Ryan showed up at my house uninvited. I have no idea how he found out where I live, but I was shocked to see him standing at my door. To make things worse, Laura was over for dinner, so we ended up dealing with him together. When I looked through the peephole and saw him, I wasn't planning to let him in. I told him to leave, but he said he had something urgent to discuss. He claimed he didn't want to be there, but he had no choice. Ryan even said he would wait outside all night if that's what it took. He also pointed out that he saw Laura's car parked outside, so he knew she was there too. I didn't want to create a scene, so I reluctantly let him in. Once inside, Ryan didn't waste any time. He told us he knew about my conversation with our parents a couple of weeks ago and that I was wrong for refusing to help them. He said they were disappointed in me for turning my back on them when they needed me. His tone was condescending and full of self-righteousness. I was furious. How dare he lecture me about helping the people who kicked me out because of his lies? He then turned to Laura and said she had a responsibility as well, to step up and support her brother. He claimed it was time for us to redeem ourselves. He even tried to guilt-trip Laura by bringing up moments from their childhood and my dad had supposedly been there for her. Ryan eventually revealed the real reason for his visit. He wanted us to invest in the family business, claiming it was the only way to save it. He framed it as a chance to make amends and repay our parents for everything they had done for us. It was obvious he had rehearsed this speech, likely with input from our parents. Laura and I weren't buying it. I told Ryan to leave, and things quickly escalated. He accused me of being heartless, saying our parents were struggling with health issues and barely getting by. I told him that even if I cared about their situation, I wouldn't do anything for them until they gave me a sincere, heartfelt apology. Ryan scoffed at that and said I was being petty. My aunt stepped in and told Ryan that the way he and my parents were behaving was disgraceful. She asked him to leave. That's when things got really ugly. Ryan started shouting, saying I was cruel and ungrateful, and I fired back. Years of pent-up resentment boiled over, and I said things I had been holding back for a long time. Ryan did the same. It got so heated that it almost turned physical, but Laura managed to stop us before it got that far. She firmly told Ryan to leave, and eventually, he stormed out after cursing at both of us. After he left, I broke down. The entire encounter brought back all the pain and trauma from my childhood, and I felt like I was right back in that toxic environment where everyone was against me. Laura stayed the night to comfort me, and I'm so grateful for her. I'm doing better now, but I'm still angry and hurt. Update 3: It's been 3 days since Ryan's visit. This morning, Laura told me that she had received a call from my dad, asking her to meet with him. She was hesitant but said she wanted to hear what he had to say. I told her I'd go with her to make sure they didn't try to manipulate her or guilt-trip her into giving them money. When we arrived, my parents looked surprised to see me but quickly tried to play it off. They repeated the same sob story they'd told me before about their financial struggles and how Ryan was withholding money from them. They then asked Laura directly if she could help them out financially. Laura was diplomatic, telling them she needed time to think about it and didn't want to be pressured. She also made it clear that they shouldn't harass her the way they had been pestering me. My parents got defensive, claiming they hadn't been harassing me and were simply doing what anyone would in a desperate situation. That's when I decided to confront them. I asked why, when I was desperate for their help years ago, they turned me away without a second thought. Now, suddenly, they expected the people they'd hurt and neglected to save them. I demanded an explanation, though I doubted they'd have a good one. Predictably, they came up with excuses, blaming me for being distant and praising Ryan for always making an effort to connect with them. It was laughable. They acted like I was some acquaintance instead of their child, as if I hadn't spent years trying to earn their approval while they ignored me. Toward the end of the conversation, they finally let something slip. They hadn't expected me to be the successful one. That stung, but it also confirmed what I'd always suspected. They'd written me off years ago, assuming Ryan would be their golden ticket. Laura and I left after telling them we'd think about their request. We won't be helping them, of course. On the way home, Laura and I talked it over and agreed we needed to end this chapter of our lives for good. They don't deserve our help, and dragging this out will only create more drama. Final update: a week after our visit, my aunt and I made the decision to cut off contact with my parents completely. We agreed there was no point in prolonging this situation or giving them false hope. Their refusal to take accountability for their actions, combined with their manipulation tactics, made it clear that nothing had really changed. Laura called my dad the following evening to give him the answer. She told him in no uncertain terms that she wouldn't be giving them any financial help, and neither would I. She explained that the damage they caused by throwing me out, cutting ties with her, and favoring Ryan over everyone else was irreversible. Laura said she wasn't going to let them guilt her into taking responsibility for their bad decisions. My dad tried to argue, saying they were desperate and that they never meant for things to turn out this way. He insisted that Ryan had misled them and that they were just victims of his greed. But Laura stood her ground and told him that was something they'd need to sort out with Ryan, not us. She hung up before he could argue further. Since then, I've been receiving endless messages from both my parents and Ryan. My dad keeps saying they deserve a second chance and that I should forgive them for everything because family comes first. Ryan, on the other hand, has taken a more aggressive approach, calling me selfish and ungrateful for not stepping in to save the business. He even accused me of wanting to see the family fail out of spite. I haven't responded to any of their messages. Every time I think about doing so, I remember how they treated me all those years ago, and it strengthens my resolve. I don't owe them anything, and I refuse to let them drag me back into their toxic drama. They made their choices, and now they have to live with the consequences. Laura has been incredibly supportive through all of this, and I'm so grateful to have her in my life. She reminded me that it's okay to protect my peace and prioritize my own well-being over people who only reach out when they need something. I've decided to focus on my own life and the family I've built for myself, the one that truly loves and values me. As for Ryan, I have no interest in ever speaking to him again. I don't think he'll stop trying to interfere in my life anytime soon, but I'm ready to block him if he doesn't back off. This entire experience has been a painful reminder of why I distanced myself from my parents in the first place. While I wish things could have been different, I know now that some relationships aren't worth saving. I'm at peace with my decision and ready to move forward, leaving the past behind me for good. Thank you for watching the video. Subscribe and turn on notifications to be the first to have Radish and real stories with you. Have a great day.